Hey, what's up, guys? Ken here from the Retro Toyscapades channel. Thanks for joining me, and this is episode 2 of Toy Talk. And today, we're going to be talking about the images of the new MOTU Origins Castle Grayskull that just flooded the internet over the last weekend. And man, oh man, this thing sure does look glorious, especially when you see the packaging art and it's just screaming at you with so much ferocious fantasy. Yeah. But, a bit of a backstory first into my history with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe franchise. Now, I grew up in the 1980s, in case you couldn't tell, and I was a fan of just about every toy line that was around at the time. He-Man was one of the first cartoon and toy lines that I developed an obsession with, but I never actually owned any of the toys as a kid. Now, I do remember seeing the original Castle Grayskull in stores when I was a kid. Now, I remember seeing the box actually, and it was probably the largest toy box that I ever seen in my whole life up to that point. In fact, even today, it still holds up as one of the largest toy packages ever put on retail shelves. The actual castle itself was, pretty tiny by comparison, but the box, oh man, the box was just about the size of a small dining table. Now, shortly after, in about the mid-80s, I became obsessed with Mask and the Transformers, and He-Man sort of went away. I mean, they were still putting out the toys and, well into something like the late 1980s, but I wasn't quite so interested anymore. Fast forward to almost about 15 years later in 2002, and there was suddenly a resurgence in retro toy properties. Transformers and G.I. Joe were both back, and I had read in Toy Fair magazine at the time that Mattel was doing He-Man again, and there was definitely a new cartoon series as well, which was fantastic, by the way. But here in Malaysia, the toys never actually hit retail until sometime in mid-2004. Actually, the team that had been working on the He-Man line, which was the Four Horsemen, they started working on Mattel's new Batman line, done in the same 7-inch style and articulation as the He-Man figures. And what happened here in Malaysia was that those Batman figures started appearing first, on shelves in 2003, way before we got any of the new Masters of the Universe stuff. But like I said, the figures started turning up in 2004, and some kind of retro fever just took over me, and I just started buying them all up. I mean, it was like I was making up for lost time. I had cash now, I was working, and I still like toys. So Mattel had a newly designed Castle Grayskull for the 2002 series. Actually, they put out 2 different versions of the same castle. The first one had some kind of feature that would interact with an action chip that was contained within the first series of action figures. So the castle would interact with the chip. It's like the castle door would open if a heroic master was standing in front of it, stuff like that. Yeah, sounds wild, right? Yeah, it sounds like something that you just gotta have. Well, that version never came to retail in Malaysia. Nope. So we can just forget about that. But the version that did make it to retail was the Castle Grayskull that didn't have the interactive features, but it had everything else. And, there was a lot of it. At the time in 2004, I think that was probably the best playset that I had ever owned. Firstly, it was massive, okay, much bigger than the original, and then it was electronic, okay. By electronic, I don't mean that it just made a few pew 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 sounds, okay. I mean, this thing was jam-packed, with electronic features, okay, multiple audio clips, laser fire clips, lights, My favorite is the glowing feature of the skull's eyes, okay. They would just flicker on and off, just freaking cool, man. Now, I know that the castle is not particularly everyone's favorite. It does have some silly things like a jail cell for the bad guys that looks more like a playpen for babies. Yeah, but all in, it was still a sight to behold. Oh yeah. What it wasn't though was sturdy. Okay, I mean, this thing was made out of some of the thinnest plastic that you could cobble together for such a massive playset. And over the years, the plastic would sort of just harden and crack really easily. Now, my own unit has sections now that are completely shattered. So I guess you could say that I own a battle-damaged variant. Now, a few years down the road, and as part of the Motu Classic series, we got the biggest Castle Grayskull ever made. But this thing was priced out of almost everyone's range, and I know of only a few people who actually own it. But yes, it was stunning, although for a premium price, it was expected to be. Now, let's see, did I miss any? Okay, then we also had the Mega Constructs Castle Grayskull, which is kind of like Lego, except it's Mega Constructs. Now, I don't own any of the items in the series, but they look really nice, and I don't mind starting at some point probably. But the castle, although a bit exaggerated in some parts, is still really impressive. Okay, here in Malaysia at least, the Mega Constructs line isn't commercially available at retail just yet. Now, availability at retail is still a really big deal, and I'm glad that this new Motu Origins line can now easily be found when I walk into a Toys R Us. Well, not exactly easy because it's been selling out so fast locally, but we'll talk about that in a future video. You get the picture. Now, when it comes to the original 1980s Castle Grayskull, I only managed to get my hands on a unit sometime like 7 years ago on eBay. One of my missions at the time, and in fact still is, was to track down every single toy playset that I ever wanted as a kid. Isn't that your mission as well? Now, finally getting that Castle Grayskull felt like something that was a long time coming. But I gotta be straight with you though, and I'm gonna say something that may be controversial, but even though I was happy to finally have it, and I knew that I was holding a piece of history in my hands, truth be told, the castle felt a bit underwhelming. It felt a bit small, smaller than I thought that it was gonna be. I mean, it still looked aesthetically solid. The sculpt work is still breathtaking, and in the early 80s, this was definitely the playset to get from the hottest toy line and cartoon in the world. But somehow I felt that it just needed to be a little bit bigger so that the figures would look better next to it. And the action features didn't really blow me away either. It seemed better when I imagined it as a kid. Now, I've seen a lot of lists where the original Castle Grayskull is listed as the greatest toy playset of all time. I can certainly understand the rationale behind it, but mostly I feel it's just nostalgia talking. To me, the greatest toy playset of the 80s in terms of its functionality and design and scale in relation to the toys in the series, that was actually the Boulder Hill HQ for Mask. That's right. But that, my friends, is a video for another time. Okay, now looking at this newest incarnation of Castle Grayskull that's coming out next year as part of the Motu Origins line. Now, first up, you have the jaw-dropping painted artwork on the packaging box. Now, this is a trademark of Motu. Stunning painted artwork, and it remains as true today as it did in the 1980s. Now, I actually want to mount this box up on the wall when I do finally get it. I want it on the wall for display, and when people walk in and they see it, they're just going to stop straight in their tracks. They're just going to stop and they're going to be like, holy hell, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm looking at the pictures of the castle, and one thing that's obvious is that this is probably the first time since the 80s that we're getting a new Castle Grayskull that's exactly in the spirit of the original. Now, everything from the design to the sculpt and even the size, this looks like the Grayskull of our childhood, just updated a little bit with a slightly modern twist and maybe more technical accuracy. The skull face in front. Okay, I've seen some comments online where some people seem to prefer the original because the original had this slightly more ghostly look to it. It looked like the castle was a real haunted house because the eyes and the mouth and the teeth looked like they were forced through the stone that formed the castle, forced from inside. It had a more slightly rugged look to it. This new version kind of looks like the Eternians had a professional architect on hand to make sure that everything looks straight and that there was symmetry. Okay, I'm not saying that the castle doesn't look fearful. It just looks a lot neater than the original did. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Now we also see that the accessories are also a direct homage to the original, just recolored differently in some places. We have the training bar and the laser cannon, the weapons rack, which is now brown instead of orange. There's what appears to be a new weapons rack or shelf of some kind with the symbol of a falcon on top of it. The flag and the ladder are back too, though the ladder is a lot smaller looking than I remember it. Yeah. Over on the inside, there's a lot that takes you straight back to the original as well. Now we've got the same interior accessories like the throne with the trapdoor, the elevator, and this time around, they've changed the computer consoles and the panels to sculpted parts instead of the cardboard attachments like the original. Now, that was one of the bits with the original Castle Grayskull that I always had a hard time reconciling with. I mean, the whole toy is a work of fantasy, sure, but I still needed it to be consistent. So, if you have a toy that's made out primarily of plastic, don't have parts of it that are supposed to be plastic suddenly made out of cardboard, not within the same reality. It's like if you got a playset and it came with two action figures, and one of them was plastic and the other was made out of thick paper. That's like asking to bend reality a little bit too much within the same space. Overall, when I look at the new Castle Grayskull, it is exciting for sure, and I'm definitely going to get one, and it's certain to be another sold out bestseller. But other than some cosmetic changes, there's nothing here that looks like too much of a departure from what we've already got in the 1980s. So that, in a way, kind of diminishes the impact for me a little bit. Although, the set does come with an exclusive sorceress figure in white attire. That's new. The original castle didn't come with any free figures, this one does. And the inclusion of the sorceress is a natural fit. I'm not too crazy about the all-white attire, but it is a nice variant, and the version in her standard outfit, as she's more commonly associated with, is probably going to turn up in the regular action figure series. Yeah, so look out for that one. And I would say that this set is a fantastic second chance for anyone who always wanted one in the 80s but never got around to owning it. And we've sure been seeing a lot of second chances at the toy stores lately with retro releases, the real Ghostbusters and G.I. Joe as well. Everything old is gold again. So hey guys, let me know what you thought of the video, what you think of the new Castle Grayskull, if you ever owned the original, and what you'd like me to cover in the next episode of Toy Talk. Thanks, and I'll catch you guys again real soon.